Welcome to the 20th Sunday after Pentecost. We're talking about Matthew's Gospel today. We're in the 22nd chapter, but really the story begins back in the 21st chapter, around verse 19, when Jesus is confronted when he's teaching on the Temple Mount, probably in the Portico of Solomon, which seems to be his favorite hangout. And the temple priests come up to him and they say, temple priests and elders, by what authority are you doing these things? By what authority, in other words, are you teaching? And they're trying, of course, to trick Jesus into saying who he is, which would key the chief priests and the elders to be able to arrest him right there. Jesus is way too smart for that. He knows it. And so he blows into, instead of answering their question, what he does is he says, well, I'll tell you what. I'll ask you a question, and you answer my question, and when you answer my question, I'll answer yours. And he asks him a question about John the Baptist and his authority. And, of course, the chief priests and the elders, I'm sure you're aware, do not answer the question. They sidestep the question. And that's kind of where we start with the series of three parables in a row. The parable of the tenants, which we heard last week, the parable of the sons, which is where Jesus is telling them the story about the one son who said, yes, he would go to the field and work, and he didn't go, and the other son said no, he wouldn't, but then got up and went to the field. That's the first one. The parable of the tenants, the wicked tenants, is the second one. And then this week we're talking about the parable of the fig tree and the withered fig tree. The wedding banquet is what we're talking about. So to really understand this wedding banquet, we need to go back once again to chapter 21, but this time a little further back, verse 9. And we see Jesus walking up to the temple, up to Jerusalem. As he's walking up to Jerusalem, he sees a fig tree. And he and his disciples walk up to the fig tree. Jesus went to get a piece of fruit off the fig tree, and it wasn't season for fruit producing. And Jesus cursed the fig tree, and the fig tree withered right in front of their eyes, right in front of the disciples' eyes. And this disturbed the disciples that Jesus would make this fig tree wither. But to understand the message that Jesus was sending his disciples, we have to go all the way back to the Old Testament, where we learn that the fig tree is a symbol for Israel. And so Israel is not producing fruit, just like the fig tree was not producing fruit. Now, the fig tree was not producing fruit because it was in this season, but Israel was not producing fruit and hadn't been producing fruit for a while. When I say fruit, I'm talking about being what they're being called to do, be salt and light. And so I flash forward to these three parables that Jesus teaches now, and we're in the one about the wedding banquet. And the master, the king is throwing a wedding banquet for the bridegroom. Now these words are really important because the king, we're going to find out, is God. The bridegroom is Jesus. So God is throwing a party for his son, the bridegroom, Jesus, and he invites honored guests, which are the Israelites, the nation, the priests, the elders, all the nations, the dignitaries, to the party. But they blow the king off. Two of them, one goes back to his farm, the other goes back to his business, and then the ones that are left take these servants that the king has sent to tell them that the party's ready, and they kill them. And for us, that's a sign that Israel has taken the prophets, the servants or the prophets that God has sent to them, and they have killed the prophets, most of them in Jerusalem, by the way. And so then the king gets angry and he sends his wrath. And of course, we've seen in the Old Testament over and over again where Israel has been attacked and they've been exiled and they've been back in. And so here we are again. We've got another prophet. Jesus is a prophet, a priest, and a king. He's in this prophetic view. He's here with them again, and the chief priests and elders are plotting to kill him. Another prophet, another killing. Except this prophet's a little different. But I digress. We go on to in this story. The king sends out his servants, but this time he sends out the servants to gather people from the main streets. It depends on the thoroughfares, the whatever you want to call the streets. personally, I think a better translation of the Greek would be the rural countries. And I know my Southern's coming out. The sticks or the boonies, way out, gathering people, farmers and fishermen and people that would have never been invited to a king's banquet thrown for the bridegroom, would have never been invited to this. And the servants bring these people in. And as they bring them in, the king knows that they're not going to be dressed properly because, well, they don't have money to afford the dress. So he provides the dress for them in the form of a wedding gown, or not a wedding gown, wedding robes. So he has that for them at the door, the wedding robes at the door for them. Now, we've already determined that the king is God, the bridegroom is Jesus, the servants are the prophets, and that the first invited guests are the Israelites, the nation of Israel. The second time the servants go out and invite the guests in, those guests are us, the Gentiles, the people who would have never been invited to a Jewish king's party for his bridegroom, for the bridegroom, his son, Jesus, would have never been invited. And yet we're invited in, and we don't have the proper clothes because we're not the chosen ones. We were not the chosen ones. Israel were the chosen ones. And so God clothes us with those robes, and those robes are God's grace and God's mercy. And what a beautiful image of God inviting us, outsiders, in, grafting us to this covenant that he has with the Jews through Jesus Christ. And we're clothed with grace and mercy, God's grace and mercy. And all of a sudden, a place we would never find ourselves, at a party thrown by a king for the bridegroom, Jesus, we find ourselves at this party and at this banquet, at this feast. Now, there's this really terrible part that is kind of at the tail end of this story that everybody gets hung up on, and I want to open this up a little bit. There's a man who's sitting at the banquet table, and I'm sure he's probably doing what I would do, which is fill his plate up with food. And the king sees him, and he goes over to him, and he goes, "Friend, why aren't you wearing the proper robes? Why are you not wearing the robe that I provided for you? Why are you not wearing that?" And the gentleman didn't have anything to say. He never answered him. And so the king asked his servants to bind him and throw him out into the darkness. Now, that can seem kind of disturbing until you step back and take a look at this. That person who was at the wedding banquet inside the banquet hall, which is now the church, is the allegory for the church. He's in the church, and he's not wearing the provided garments. That's somebody who has come into our midst and has rejected the grace and the mercy that God provides for us. God does not bring us in to his presence without giving us everything that we need to be in God's presence, his grace and his mercy. So if we come into his presence without his grace and his mercy, then there are consequences to that. And those consequences are the same as the first people who were invited and rejected the invitation. They will also be put out and not allowed to be part of the feast. Now, friends, here's the good news that resides within this story. Those of us who are in the church and who have accepted God's grace and God's mercy have an opportunity every Sunday to join at the banquet table, which is our altar rail, and receive the heavenly banquet, the manna that God provides for us in the form of the body and blood of Jesus Christ. Now, we believe that everybody that comes in and accepts that body and blood of Jesus Christ at that moment is as clean as they can possibly be, receiving with God, covered with God's grace and mercy, receiving the body and blood of Christ. You are renewed with that. And so, friends, I want to invite you, if you're not already in our ecclesia, in our church, in the midst of this banquet, to come and join us in the midst of this banquet. I know this is on the internet. Anybody can see it and do it. And I want to offer that invitation to you. If you don't have a church, if you do not have a church, you don't already have a worshiping community, come to Church of the Redeemer. Learn more about this Bible. Learn more about God's grace and God's love for you. And we are a full Bible church. We talk about the Old Testament and the New Testament alike. Every Sunday you'll hear those along with beautiful music, and you'll be invited to the banquet feast through the Holy Communion. So please come and join us. Do that. Know that invitation is open to you. Thank you, my friends, and God bless.